This course takes a look at Spring Boot, which is one of the latest and most exciting additions to the Spring framework. Using Boot, you will see that Spring projects that once took hours to configure now take a few minutes. Spring Boot makes this possible by relying heavily upon the convention over configuration approach and supplying default configurations known as auto configuration. If you are new to Spring, Boot makes it extremely simple to get up and running with the framework. It knocks down the barriers to entry and levels the playing field for developers new to Spring development. It has never been easier to use the Spring framework thanks to Spring Boot. So let's take a closer look at Spring Boot. The days of manually configuring Spring projects are quickly fading away, and the developer's job has become significantly easier. As you learn more about Boot, you'll see that we can set up any type of Spring project in a matter of a few minutes. A variety of starter POMs and auto configurations made available by Spring Boot will have you building Spring applications in no time. You'll also find that the framework relies heavily upon self-executing jars, so even the complexity of working with an external servlet container has been removed. These changes are your passport to exploring the entire Spring ecosystem. In the past, it would have taken years to learn how to configure each individual Spring project. Now, Spring Boot performs all of this work on your behalf. This allows you to quickly test and evaluate all projects under the Spring umbrella. So you're going to be easily able to step into something like a Spring MVC project or a Spring Boot project or a Spring Data project and get up and running quickly. In the past, configuration was one of the toughest problems to solve when working with the Spring framework or any of the modules falling under its umbrella. These barriers are eliminated by Spring Boot. Let's now take a look at how our course is organized. So the course is broken down into three main sections. First, we'll learn about the basics of Spring Boot. We'll explore creating a boot project with Maven and Gradle. We'll see how to customize the auto configuration provided by Boot to meet the specific needs of our project. Sometimes we don't want to use the default configuration for Boot and we have to know how to override it. Once we have these basics covered, we'll move on to see how Spring Boot integrates with various other Spring Framework modules or projects. We'll see how quick it is to set up an application that persists data using JDBC or Spring Data. We'll learn how to leverage caching support with EHCache, and we'll see how to set up a Spring MVC project to build a dynamic web application. You'll learn how to protect your applications with Spring Security as well. All of these modules and more are unlocked by Spring Boot. You'll no longer need to pay the cost of entry to get up and running quickly with all of the Spring modules. Most of these modules correspond with a third-party framework that Spring eases the integration to. So not only will you unlock the different modules within Spring, you're going to be opening the door to these third-party libraries that you can include within your projects. After we cover how to configure all of these modules, we'll take a look at some tools provided by Spring Boot that fulfill common developer requirements. For example, we'll learn how to automatically trigger builds based upon a changing class path. We'll see logging improvements and also learn how to use the actuator. The actuator is very exciting. It provides a whole toolbox of features that support application diagnostics. So we're talking about things like health checks and getting further insights into the Spring IOC container and viewing beans, all through HTTP calls to our application and the actuator. By the end of this course, you'll feel confident that you can quickly establish a Spring project for existing and future modules using Spring Boot. So let's talk a little bit about the prerequisites for this course and the intended audience. You can't be a beginner. This shouldn't be your first programming course. but at the same time, you don't need to be in that intermediate range. You should be a developer looking to take on a better approach to building applications. So, if you're in that situation, what you'll need to know is definitely some Java. So, you got to have the basics, creating methods, creating classes, looking at things like interfaces, inheritance. You should have those principles of Java down. You should have some understanding of the Spring cores, looking at things like dependency injection, as well as auto wiring, also looking at other concepts such as controllers and REST controllers. Those things should be part of your playbook. You should also have a little bit of familiarity with a build tool. Maven or Gradle will do. You don't have to have a lot of heavy knowledge in that area. One thing you will need to be able to do for some of the lessons is be able to configure your data stores. So, like a MySQL data store and MongoDB. If you want to complete those lessons, we're not going to walk through the configuration step by step. There's too many third party tools that we would have to configure in order to use. If you can configure those data stores on your own, you'll be fine. If not, there are plenty of guides out in the web that show how to do this, and there are other resources provided by O'Reilly that demonstrate how to set up these data stores. So that's it for our course overview. This is going to be an exciting course that's really going to open doors in the Spring framework for you. If you're familiar with my style, I rely heavily upon being in the IDE and doing actual work. I'm not going to PowerPoint you to death. So looking forward to working with you throughout this course.